The Supermarket of Terror. Story 1. The Overnight Shift. Emily had just graduated from college, and despite her best efforts, she was struggling to find a job. After months of searching, she finally landed a job as a night shift employee at the local supermarket. She wasn't too thrilled about it, but it was a job nonetheless. She was given a tour of the store by the night manager, a gruff man named Mr. Johnson, who warned her about the creepy old storage room in the back. "Whatever you do, don't go in there," he said, his voice low and serious. "It's haunted or cursed or something." Emily laughed it off, thinking Mr. Johnson was just trying to scare her. The first week on the job went smoothly. She spent most of her time stocking shelves and organizing products. But something felt off. The store was always empty and quiet, and Emily started to hear strange noises coming from the storage room. It sounded like something was moving around in there, but she never saw anyone go in or out. Emily tried to brush it off, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. On the third night, she found herself trapped inside the store with a group of strangers. The doors were locked, and there was no way out. At first, they tried to break down the doors or find a window to climb out of. But they quickly realized they were stuck. The lights flickered, and the air grew cold. Emily tried to call for help, but her phone had no signal. As the night progressed, they realized they weren't alone. Something was watching them from the shadows, and it wasn't friendly. Emily saw shadows moving along the walls, and she heard whispers in her ear. The other employees were terrified, and Emily tried to calm them down, but she was just as scared. It wasn't until they found an old journal in the back office that they learned the truth. The supermarket was built on an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of the dead were not happy about it. The journal belonged to a previous employee who had experienced similar events. She had warned the night manager about the haunted storage room, but he never believed her. Emily realized that they were trapped in the store with vengeful spirits, and they weren't going to let them leave. They had to find a way to appease the spirits or find a way out of the store. But it wasn't going to be easy. The shelves started to rattle, and products flew off them, crashing to the ground. Emily and the other employees tried to run, but the spirits seemed to be blocking their path. They could hear the whispers growing louder, and they saw shadows moving around them. It wasn't until they found an old Ouija board in the storage room that they realized what the spirits wanted. They needed to communicate with the dead and find out why they were angry. Emily was hesitant, but the other employees convinced her it was their only hope. They sat around the board, their fingers on the planchette. Emily felt a cold breeze blow through the room, and she shivered. The board started to move, and the letters spelled out a message. The spirits were angry because the supermarket was built on their burial ground. They demanded that the employees leave and never return. Emily and the other employees tried to make a break for the doors, but they were blocked by a wall of spirits. They could hear their angry whispers, and they saw the shadows moving closer. Emily remembered something from the journal. The previous employee had managed to escape by apologizing to the spirits and promising to never come back. Emily stepped forward, her hand shaking. She apologized to the spirits for disturbing their resting place and promised to never come back. The shadows started to recede, and the whispers grew fainter. Emily and the other employees made their way to the doors and found that they were no longer blocked. They pushed them open and ran out into the night. They never looked back as they ran down the empty street, away from the haunted supermarket. Emily never worked the overnight shift again, and she never forgot the terror she experienced that night. She knew she had come face to face with the supernatural, and it was something she never wanted to experience again. The next day, Emily went back to the supermarket to collect her things. Mr. Johnson was there, and he could see that something was wrong. "What happened last night?" he asked. Emily hesitated, unsure if she should tell him the truth. But then she remembered the warning he had given her about the haunted storage room. "We were trapped in the store with vengeful spirits," she said, her voice trembling. "They were angry because the store was built on an ancient burial ground. We had to communicate with them and apologize before they would let us leave." Mr. Johnson looked skeptical, but he didn't say anything. Emily gathered her things and left the store, never to return. As she walked away, she couldn't help but wonder how many other people had worked the overnight shift at the supermarket and encountered the spirits. She knew that the store would never be the same for her, and she would always remember the terror she experienced that night. From that day on, Emily made sure to research the history of any place she worked before starting the job. She didn't want to encounter any more vengeful spirits or haunted places. She knew that the supernatural was real, and she would always be wary of it. Weeks passed, but Emily couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. She had been having nightmares about the supermarket and the spirits that haunted it. She couldn't help but wonder if they had followed her home. One night, Emily was working on her computer when she heard a strange noise. It sounded like something was scratching at her bedroom door. She got up to investigate and found nothing there. But when she turned around, she saw a dark figure in the corner of her room. Emily froze in terror as the figure moved closer. It was the shadowy outline of a person, but there was something off about it. It seemed to be made of darkness and mist, and it didn't have any distinct features. Emily tried to run, but the figure blocked her path. It spoke to her in a whisper, and she could feel its cold breath on her skin. It was the same voice she had heard in the supermarket. "We warned you not to return," it said, its voice echoing in her mind. "You shouldn't have ignored our warning." Emily realized that the spirits had followed her home, and they weren't happy. She tried to reason with them, but they were beyond reason. They wanted revenge for the disturbance of their resting place, and they weren't going to stop until they got it. Emily tried to run, but the figure blocked her way. It was as if it was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. She knew she was trapped, and there was no way out. As the figure moved closer, Emily felt a sense of dread wash over her. She knew she was going to die, and there was nothing she could do about it. But then, she remembered something from the journal. The previous employee had managed to escape by making a deal with the spirits. Emily stepped forward, her voice shaking. She apologized to the spirits for disturbing their resting place and promised to make it up to them. She offered to find a new resting place for them and give them a proper burial. The figure hesitated, and Emily saw a glimmer of something in its eyes. It seemed to be considering her offer. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it disappeared. Emily breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed on her bed. She knew she had narrowly escaped death, and she knew she had to keep her promise to the spirits. She spent the next few days researching the history of the burial ground and the people who had been buried there. She found a new resting place for the spirits and arranged for a proper burial. After the spirits were laid to rest, Emily never experienced anything supernatural again. She knew that the spirits had been appeased, and she had made amends for disturbing their resting place. But she knew that she would always be wary of the supernatural and the things that lurked in the shadows. The overnight shift at the supermarket had changed her life forever, and she knew she would never forget the terror she had experienced. But she also knew that she had learned an important lesson. The supernatural was real, and it was something that couldn't be ignored or taken lightly. Story 2. The Cursed Supermarket. Jenny had just started her first job at the local supermarket, and she was excited to be working as a cashier. She had heard rumors about the supermarket being cursed, but she didn't believe in that sort of thing. To her, it was just a silly superstition. On her first day, she was introduced to the other employees, and they showed her around the store. Everything seemed normal, but there was something off about the atmosphere. It was as if the air was heavy with a sense of foreboding. As the day went on, Jenny started to notice strange things happening. Items would disappear from the shelves and reappear in different places. The lights flickered, and strange noises echoed through the store. But when she asked the other employees about it, they just shrugged it off and said it was normal. Jenny was starting to get worried. She knew that something wasn't right, but she didn't know what to do. She tried to brush it off and focus on her job, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. One night, Jenny was working the closing shift. The other employees had already left, and she was alone in the store. She was putting away the last of the merchandise when she heard a strange noise coming from the storage room. She walked over to investigate and found the door slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dark, and she couldn't see anything. But then, she heard something move in the corner. Jenny froze in terror as she saw a figure step out of the shadows. It was a woman, but there was something off about her. Her skin was pale and ghostly, and her eyes were dark and empty. The woman spoke to her in a whisper, and Jenny could feel her cold breath on her skin. "You should leave this place," she said. "It's cursed, and you're in danger." Jenny tried to run, but the woman blocked her path. She spoke again, and her voice echoed through the room. "The curse will claim you too, if you stay. You have been warned." Jenny managed to push past the woman and ran out of the storage room. She grabbed her things and left the store, never to return. From that day on, Jenny was plagued by nightmares of the cursed supermarket. She knew that the woman she had seen in the storage room was a ghost, and she had been warning her about the curse. But Jenny couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that hung over her. She started to do some research about the supermarket and found out that it had been built on the site of an old graveyard. The bodies had been relocated, but the spirits of the dead remained. Jenny realized that the supermarket was cursed, and she had been lucky to escape with her life. She knew that she had to warn others about the curse and try to break it. She contacted a paranormal investigator and explained the situation. The investigator agreed to help and set up equipment to detect any paranormal activity. Together, They conducted an investigation of the supermarket, and what they found was horrifying. The store was crawling with spirits, and they were angry. They had been disturbed by the construction of the supermarket and wanted revenge. The investigator worked with Jenny to perform a cleansing ritual, but it was too late. The curse was too strong, and it couldn't be broken. The only option was to close the supermarket and leave it abandoned. Jenny watched as the supermarket was boarded up and left to rot. She knew that the curse had claimed it, and it would never be the same again. Years later, Jenny would drive by the abandoned supermarket and feel a sense of unease. She knew that the curse still lingered, and she wondered if anyone else would ever venture into the cursed supermarket again. But then, one night, Jenny heard a strange noise coming from outside her window. She looked out and saw a group of teenagers sneaking into the abandoned supermarket. Jenny knew that they were in grave danger, but she couldn't just sit there and do nothing. She quickly got dressed and headed out to the supermarket. As she approached the building, she could feel the curse weighing down on her. She pushed through the fear and entered the store. Inside, she could hear the teenagers laughing and shouting. They had no idea the danger they were in. Jenny called out to them, but they didn't hear her. She followed their voices to the back of the store and found them standing in front of the storage room. They were trying to pry the door open, but it wouldn't budge. Jenny tried to warn them about the curse, but they just laughed and called her crazy. They continued to try and open the door, and suddenly it swung open on its own. A thick, black mist poured out of the room and enveloped the teenagers. They screamed in terror as they were lifted off the ground and pulled into the darkness. Jenny could hear their cries echoing through the store, and she knew that she had to get out before it was too late. She turned and ran, but the mist was following her. It was as if the curse was alive, and it was hungry. She could feel it closing in on her, and she knew that she had to find a way to break it. Jenny remembered something that the paranormal investigator had told her during their investigation. The curse could only be broken if the spirits were appeased. She knew that she had to find a way to do it. She went back to the storage room and saw a pile of old documents sitting on a shelf. She picked them up and started to read. They were old records from the graveyard that had been moved to make way for the supermarket. Jenny found a list of names and dates and realized that these were the people who had been buried in the graveyard. She knew that she had to find a way to give them peace. She went back to the store and started to perform a ritual. She spoke to the spirits and apologized for what had been done to their graves. She promised to make things right and asked for their forgiveness. As she spoke, the mist began to dissipate. The air cleared, and Jenny could feel a sense of peace settling over the store. She knew that she had done what she could to break the curse. Jenny left the store, and as she drove away, she could see the lights flickering in the windows. She knew that the curse was still there, but she had done what she could to help the spirits find peace. From that day on, the cursed supermarket was left abandoned. People would drive by and see the boarded-up windows and the overgrown weeds, but they knew better than to enter. The curse had claimed its victims, and it would never be broken. Story 3. The Killer Vending Machine. It was just another normal day at the office. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the employees were hard at work. But little did they know, something sinister was brewing inside the vending machine. As the day wore on, the employees started to notice something strange about the vending machine. It seemed to be acting up, dispensing snacks and drinks without any money being inserted. At first, they thought it was just a glitch in the machine, but as the day progressed, it became clear that something else was going on. One employee, Sarah, decided to investigate. She approached the vending machine and pressed the button for a bag of chips. To her surprise, the bag was dispensed without her inserting any money. She took a bite of the chips and immediately felt sick. At first, she thought it was just a bad batch of chips, but as she looked at the vending machine, she noticed something strange. There was a small hole in the front of the machine, almost as if something was watching her. Sarah quickly backed away from the machine, feeling a sense of unease wash over her. She knew that something was wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Later that day, one of the employees went to use the restroom. As he entered the stall, he heard a strange noise coming from the toilet. He leaned in for a closer look and saw something that made his blood run cold. Inside the toilet bowl, he could see a pair of eyes staring back at him. He quickly pulled back and ran out of the restroom, screaming for help. The other employees rushed to see what was going on, and they were met with a horrifying sight. The vending machine had grown legs and arms and was attacking anyone who came near it. The machine had turned into a killer, and there was no escape. The employees tried to flee, but the vending machine was too fast. It chased them down the hallways and around corners, using its metal limbs to crush anything in its path. One by one, the employees fell victim to the killer vending machine. Some were crushed to death, while others were torn apart by the machine's sharp edges. Sarah, the only survivor, managed to find a way to disable the machine. She used a metal pipe to smash the glass front of the vending machine, exposing its inner workings. Inside, she found a swarm of mechanical insects, each one buzzing and crawling over the wires and circuits of the machine. They were the cause of the vending machine's sudden transformation, and Sarah knew that she had to destroy them. She grabbed a can of bug spray and started to douse the insects, spraying them until they stopped moving. The vending machine shuddered and convulsed, and then it fell silent. The employees were all dead, their bodies scattered around the office. Sarah was the only one left, and she knew that she had to leave before the police arrived. As she walked out of the office, she could hear the sound of sirens in the distance. She knew that she had narrowly escaped death, but she also knew that the killer vending machine was still out there, waiting to claim its next victim. This content may violate our content policy. If you believe this to be an error, please submit your feedback. Your input will aid our research in this area. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah tried her best to move on from the traumatic experience. She took some time off work and tried to distract herself with hobbies and spending time with friends, but the memory of the killer vending machine lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The vending machine had been cursed, and she feared that it could happen again. One day, while grocery shopping, Sarah stumbled upon a vending machine in the corner of the store. She felt her heart rate spike as she approached it, the memory of the killer machine still fresh in her mind. As she stood in front of the vending machine, she noticed that it had the same small hole in the front as the one at her office. She peered inside and saw nothing but the usual rows of snacks and drinks. Sarah tried to convince herself that it was just a coincidence, that the vending machine was harmless. But as she inserted her coins and selected a bag of chips, she heard a strange noise coming from the machine. The vending machine shook and rattled, and Sarah knew that she had to get out of there. She grabbed her bag of chips and turned to leave, but the vending machine had other plans. Its metal arms reached out and grabbed Sarah by the waist, pulling her towards the machine. She screamed for help, but there was no one around. The vending machine lifted her off the ground and started to crush her. Sarah could feel her bones breaking and her body being torn apart. She knew that she was going to die. But just as suddenly as it had started, the vending machine stopped. Sarah fell to the ground, gasping for air. She looked up and saw a figure standing over her, holding a sledgehammer. It was the store manager, who had seen what was happening and had rushed over to help. He swung the sledgehammer at the vending machine, smashing it into a million pieces. Sarah was rushed to the hospital, where she underwent multiple surgeries to repair the damage done to her body. She survived, but was left with scars both physical and mental. The incident made headlines, and people began to question the safety of vending machines. The store where Sarah was attacked was shut down, and the vending machine company faced multiple lawsuits. But for Sarah, the damage had already been done. She couldn't shake the feeling that the curse of the killer vending machine was still out there, waiting to strike again. Years went by, and Sarah tried her best to move on. She got married, had children, and tried to forget the horror of the killer vending machine. But deep down, she knew that it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. And as she sat at home one night, watching TV with her family, she heard a familiar sound. It was the sound of a vending machine dispensing snacks and drinks, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She turned to her husband and said, "We need to leave now." He looked at her quizzically, but didn't argue. They gathered their children and rushed out of the house, leaving everything behind. As they drove away, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the vending machine. Had it finally been destroyed, or was it still out there, waiting to strike again? She knew one thing for sure: she would never let her guard down again. The curse of the killer vending machine was still out there, and she would do whatever it takes to keep herself and her family safe.